Good afternoon, everybody. My name's Lloyd Stokes. I am the founder and director of Sourced, and this is Sourced Presents. If you haven't checked it out before, Sourced Presents is our bi-weekly, sometimes once every 3 weeks, whatever that is, sometimes monthly session. It's a chat session that we do with somebody within the tech and SaaS space. We try and keep it really varied. We try and speak to people who've come from lots of different backgrounds, who have lots of different roles, and hopefully have really interesting stories and insights to share around their experience of being in the tech and SaaS space, predominantly in the UK. This week, I'm joined by Lauren Woodcock. Lauren and I have been in contact for a little while now, and what I thought was really interesting about Lauren's story, and actually the reason why I really wanted to get her on to do this session, was two things really. One, she's had a really interesting background prior to getting into her SaaS sales career, working in lots of different countries, having loads of different experiences. I'll let her tell you more about it because it's way more interesting coming from her than it is from me. And then most recently, having had now her second full-time SaaS SDR position, with a really cool, fast-growing business called Abacum. Sales functions led by an amazing chap called Ollie Sharp, and her experiences of being in really early with Ollie and helping to play a part in building the SDR strategy. So we're going to try and cover off as much as we possibly can in 30 minutes. As always, these sessions are recorded. We post them onto our YouTube channel, and we'll share some clips on LinkedIn. So please engage with them. Please send your thoughts. It's lovely to get that interaction. That's enough about me. Let me hand you over to Lauren. Lauren, lovely to thank you for coming on first and foremost. Lovely to have you on. Maybe to start, you could give a bit of background on you.
Yeah, well, thanks so much for having me, Lloyd. I'm really excited to be here. So as you mentioned, I'm Lauren Woodcock, and I'm currently working as an SDR at Abacum, which is a really exciting, fast-growing company. And to touch more upon your question about my background and actually getting into this space, which, because if you look at my CV, might seem pretty random.
Yeah.
I'll touch more on that.
Definitely.
But I definitely think that it's helped, and I'll explain why. So a few years back, I just wanted to go and explore the world and see what's out there, and learn about different cultures and get to meet different people. And so one of the first things I did when I was traveling, I was in Vietnam. And I thought, well, at a certain point, you also need to start, getting some extra income because you're traveling alone. And so the opportunity was presented to me to teach kids English. And that was already a massive challenge, because suddenly you're stood in front of about 40 kids who don't speak English. I don't speak Vietnamese. So that's your first kind of hurdle. And being able to do that and actually, get them to engage and to, teach them stuff, that definitely helped me with, empathy and listening, which is obviously a massive part in sales. And then one of my other massive experiences whilst traveling was I fell in love with diving in the Philippines. And then I just thought, oh my gosh, this is amazing. I'm going to become a dive instructor. And then obviously, once you hit that level of being a dive instructor, it's massive pressure, because you're literally the person which is making sure that everyone is safe and having a great time. So that definitely helped me to learn with high pressure, and also consistency, because you continuously have to go to the classes and make sure that you know how to be a dive professional under pressure.
And I guess, like, if you look at those two examples, you're also really, really accountable to a group of people and ensuring that they're learning, or that they're safe, as you said, and rolling that then forward to present day. I guess having accountability for, at its most basic level, I guess, just turning up and doing your job well, is a real base level. But if you're talking about teaching children how to speak a new language, you've got to be really engaged. You've got to be really present. it's also like that comfort zone thing, I guess. It must have been, I can imagine the first time you went to go and do those lessons must have been quite daunting. The first time you took a group diving, that must be, you must be double, triple, quadruple checking absolutely everything all the time, right?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, all the scenarios kind of go through your head, but then it's just about keeping yourself calm
Yeah.
and collected and just making sure that you know, okay, well, I put the effort in, I know what I'm doing,
Yeah.
and also be able to trust yourself. So, I mean, for example, I think it's great to do stuff which do put yourself out of your comfort zone. I mean, for example, even this, I haven't done something like this before, but I think that's so important for
Yeah.
anyone in any kind of walk of life to just push yourself.
Completely, completely. I also remember I can't remember who it was, who said to me that one of the things they look for when they're hiring SDR talent, they really like people who've done like street selling or like charity, like fundraising on the streets, because it's that same thing of just like day after day after day, putting yourself in a really uncomfortable environment, doing something very, very different. Um, and that made so much sense to me. I've met so many people through the years who've gone on to be really good SDR sales professionals who've come from that background, or
Yeah, it's funny.
door-to-door selling, or
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that because when I was 14, that was one of my first jobs. I don't have it on my CV because it's not really any,
you don't normally
but I've done
reference
that.
me at 14. I don't have paper round on mine.
No. But yeah, you put yourself in those uncomfortable situations and you also get to hear no all the time. But being able to find that drive within yourself to hear no, but think, well, I'll find a yes.
So
I think that's
I didn't know that. So can we just touch on that quickly? So what were you actually what were you selling at 14? What were you doing?
well, those people on the streets that come up to you and ask for you to
Yeah.
sign up for a membership to help a charity. So I was doing that at 14.
Wow. Okay. Okay. And then like so fast forward, you've done all these things, and then what, like a couple of years ago, suddenly discover the SaaS tech space? Does it discover you? How did that work?
Well, it was actually someone that I met in Vietnam who then well had this opportunity to join SaaS Leads. And so
Yeah.
it's always so funny to think certain little things which have happened years back
Yeah.
suddenly present this whole new, well, option for you in your life. And it came at a time where I wasn't really sure because obviously COVID had just happened and then there were all those uncertainties. And then suddenly I was presented with this possibility to, well, move to the UK and start this whole new career. And I just thought, well, why not? If I can do all of that, then let's just do my absolute best and see where it brings me.
So how long had you been overseas when you came back?
Well, I had to come back because of COVID.
Right.
So I was back for about a year and a half, 2 years.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, it was just a chance meeting again in London when I just sporadically flew to London to see my best friend. And then it just one thing after the other led to where I am now. And I'm really happy about it.
And if you think about we talked about some of the skills that you've probably learned along the way, and that have really, really helped you to kind of, yeah, in the first couple of kind of, I guess, the formative years of your SaaS and tech career. What are some of the other things that maybe you've reflected on over the last year or two where you thought, actually, those experiences and some of those other things, that's really helped me as well, which have really, because I think this is fascinating. And I know that you and I spoke before about the idea that I think that there's some great SDR talent out there coming straight out of university, just straight, and I think it's scary, really. I think, because I just remember what I was like when I was that age and coming out, and yeah, they can really conduct themselves and do a fantastic job. But I also have the view that there are plenty of other people who maybe have got a few years of life experience, well, yeah, done different jobs, and some of those, I think, arguably, I don't know if I should say better or not, but they definitely bring something different to the SDR function in the team. And I know that you agree, but what personally have you experienced that you could say, well, that's definitely helped me?
I would say that the teaching and, well, also working in hospitality, which I hadn't mentioned either. I've worked a lot in hospitality, and it's the same kind of high pressure situations. And I think that if you can go through really high pressure situations, like there was a time that, you know, diving equipment malfunctioned, and then you just have to think, okay, I need to keep to my training and what I've learned. And then if you can go through something which is that high pressured and then still think, okay, that went well, that was intense, but we're all fine and it's worked out, and I still want to dive. I think that just persevering and going through, because there are obviously weeks where it goes great with sales and I'm booking loads of meetings, and then there are other weeks where it's more of a struggle, but it's just really remaining centered in yourself and thinking, well, I've got this, I just need to continue and I need to push through, and then tomorrow it's going to be a whole new day.
And I completely agree. And that, I think that so often that perspective and that viewpoint of trusting in the process is easier if you've got a little bit more experience.
Yeah.
Because you've got more reference points, right?
Yeah, and I think also it's really important to reflect. So when you're teaching 40 kids or teaching someone how to dive, I think it's crucial to also think, okay, well, how could I have improved that lesson? What did I do well? What could have been improved? And then also apply that. And so just always have a forward thinking motive, but always look back and think, well, how could I have done that better? But also give yourself that time to think, well, actually, I did that well.
I completely agree. I read somewhere that so many people nowadays don't reflect, and the article that I read was primarily put the mobile phone at the root of all evil, and it basically said that pre-mobile phone, when you would finish your day at work, you'd go away from doing whatever the job was that you were doing, and you'd have a bit of time, whether it be traveling home or whether it be if you're remote working, you're just at home, you'd have a period of time with no external influences, and so people would often reflect more on their day at work, what's gone well, what hasn't. But the article that I read said that when you have your phone, what happens is that most people finish work, and even though they've been sat in front of a screen, or if they're in SDR or whatever for however long for the day, the first thing they'll do is they'll go and check their social media or news or whatever it might be, and then consume other content in a different way, and don't allow for any of that period of reflection. So what consequently happens is that if you have a good day, people just go, oh, that was a good day, move on to the next day. But if you have a bad day, they also don't do that. And I kind of think maybe people should build that into their day. I don't know what you think.
Yeah, 100%. I think that that's so important. Because I think it's also, when it's been a bad day, to really reflect. And I think it's sometimes easier to not want to do that because it's been a day that hasn't necessarily made you feel good.
Yeah.
But I think then in those moments to really seize them and be able to think, okay, this wasn't excellent.
Yeah.
But that's great, because then you can learn from it and then you can excel the next day.
Completely agree. Moving forward, I guess taking it up to kind of currently, most recently, we mentioned at the very beginning, you've joined Abacum. Can you talk a bit about that process? Because I know that you had a year, just over a year working in an SDR role. You then joined Abacum, and can you give a bit more background on your reasons for joining and just what you came into when you joined?
Yeah, of course. So I was working at this amazing company called Damie, and all my colleagues were great. The product was great. The one thing that I was missing was being able to see people in person, because they were based in different countries.
Yeah.
And working remotely, that was something that, it started to really dawn on me that I needed to have that human interaction as well.
Yeah.
And so then I had a conversation with Ollie Sharp, who's the VP of sales at Abacum. And I mean, everything that he was saying was so very much aligned into what I wanted to be achieving.
Yeah.
And so for me to have someone in a leadership position, which I immediately felt like I could connect with and could spar with and have a really great conversation with, that was, massively important in the decision for me to join Abacum. It was also that it's just genuinely a really good product. Yeah. And it also made sense because it was in a similar vertical, selling into finance teams. So I thought, well, this would be a great way to get more skills and to really understand the role, so I can later on transition and, you know, progress throughout my career.
Makes sense. Makes complete sense. And I know that when we were talking, you were clear around the fact that, yeah, Ollie joined the business. There'd been a sales team in place before. Obviously, a lot gets learned from that, and that happens a lot, even, you know, more and more, I think, where for whatever reason, things just don't work as they should. And sometimes it's the wrong people, but sometimes it's the wrong time. Sometimes it's the product. There's all these different things to get right. But when you joined, were you the first hire that Ollie made?
I'm not. He hired Harry and I, who's an accounts executive there, around the same time, so we onboarded together. But I was the first SDR in our new team, which was massively exciting, because it's like, well, these people have done great work. Let's see what I can do to own it and to make it mine. And so the first thing that I really did, and I think it's fundamental for any person starting out as an SDR, if you're in your current job or not, is to 100%, and I don't think you can ever 100% understand someone that's not you, but really try to understand the persona, and then after that understand the challenge and how and why that's a challenge. And I just tried to read as many case studies as I could. I'm not someone who's necessarily on Reddit, but then I thought, oh, let's see on Reddit. And you can just find these ways to really understand why this is a problem as much as you can for someone not actually working in that sector. And so I did that. And then I delved more into, okay, well, what's the product and how can I now tie that into those challenges? Because then you know how to speak to someone, because you get what their problem is, or you can guesstimate what their problem is. Obviously, you never know from beforehand. And then you can tie the product into that. And then in me taking that approach, you know, during my onboarding, there were loads of different trigger events mentioned. So, okay, well, this is now actually a reason why this persona, that their challenge is going to become bigger, and they need this tool now so that they can help because of X, Y, and Z. And so I just created all of these different cadences, which were based on those trigger events, and then researched around that. And then was able to build some foundations for myself of, okay, well, it was more of a learning exercise for me as well, to be honest, to really understand the trigger events. But then to be able to tie that in and create cadences around it. And then also, I'm quite analytical. So you can always look at, well, what's being responded to and what's being opened and all of that. And then based off of that, I was able to create a foundation for myself to.
And, oh, I lost you there for a second. We froze just for a second.
Am I back?
We're back. We're back. Don't worry. That process, that initial process that you talked about, how long did that take? I mean, it's obviously an ongoing process, but to begin with, that, because there's a lot of work there, I think. It sounds like a lot of work to go through all those personas, to understand the trigger points, to read around, but how long did that take you?
A few weeks. Less than a month, because I also put the pressure onto myself of, well, I want to be reaching out and I want to get this started, because I was also aware that I was the only person there. So it was just kind of, well, not obviously you're working with your colleagues and you've got a great team surrounded you, the only SDR. And so I was just like, well, let's get this done as quickly as possible and just get into hyperfocus. With me having ADHD, that's one of the massive benefits is you can sit down, and when you're interested you can get so much work done. So I was able to implement that quite quickly. And then obviously now what's really exciting is having, you know, our new SDR manager join and the team expand and everything, getting inputs from everyone else, so that it's just this living, breathing process and not necessarily just something which I put down. That's not the case at all. It's now just working as a team, which is great.
Because I think that what was the appeal for you about being the first SDR in? Because I think that's again, like, we're talking about the same thing, but it's quite a daunting thing to be the first one in, knowing that, you know, there's an SDR, there's an AE, but like you said, like I put the pressure on myself because I'm aware that I'm the only SDR. So, you know, fundamentally, you know that the outcome of your job is based on how many good quality meetings or demos that you book. Yeah, there's more to it than that, of course, but like that's the key metric that everyone works towards. So what was it about being that first person and that appealed so much to you? Was it what you were looking for when you considered the new opportunity?
No, not necessarily. What I was really looking for was having more in-person contact, and I think that when that aspect did come into play, then it did make me more excited, because I thrive under pressure. I quite like it, and I'm not saying that there was much pressure put onto me to be doing this, but I put that onto myself because I want to do my absolute best all of the time. So that made it more exciting. But yes, of course, it's super daunting in a way, because you're like, oh, and then talking about being held accountable, I hold myself accountable for the work that I do. And then when you're just one person, obviously it's very easy to see what you've done and what you haven't done. So that is daunting. But I think that if you've got a really strong leadership team around you who push you in a very positive way and trust you, then that makes it just that much more exciting.
Yeah, I think so. And you just touched on this, and I know we mentioned this when we were talking the other day, but I think that I see companies that approach us or that we're talking to who maybe don't have strong commercial leadership. Either they're early stage startups and they're more technical founders, or they've gone through that process of maybe having a sales team that's not quite worked out. And what happens is that they often think that bringing in an SDR is the first place to start, because they think, well, what do we need? Well, we need to be in front of customers. In order to get in front of customers, we need somebody to be reaching out to and doing these things. But then there can be a lot of pressure that comes from that, and so it does. What I've definitely seen is that it can set people up to fail, because or there's a very rigid defined structure that somebody comes into and they're told that's the way we do things, and even if you don't agree with that and you're somebody who's smart, analytical, puts pressure on yourself to find solutions to problems, you're not given that environment to do that. So, and then what happens is that person's not successful. They become they don't enjoy it, and then they either leave or they get asked to leave because they're not hitting the metrics they should, even though they probably could. And I think what you've gone into is an environment where there has been some change, but you have got a really experienced commercial leader who, I think, to tell me if I'm wrong, doesn't believe there's only one way to do things, and actually gives you the opportunity to, is it, you've been empowered by Ollie? Would you agree to kind of go out there and make some mistakes along the way as well, but just find the way that works? Is that fair?
Oh, 100%. And not just by Ollie, I would say by the whole leadership team at Abacum. I think what's really great is how transparent and trusting people are as well.
Yeah.
And I think that for me, at least, when I feel like someone trusts me, then I 100% want to go that extra 10 miles, because then I've been given trust. So I don't want to let anyone down that's trusted me.
Yeah.
But also equally, if I then think, oh, actually, I've made a mistake here, then it's very much a place where I can say, yeah, no, I've made a mistake here. I've learned from it. This is what I've learned from it. I won't be doing that again. And then it's just like, well, no, you're a person, And I think that having a leadership team in place which allows you to feel that way is imperative for a company to thrive.
I completely agree. It's not easy to get though. And it's not easy to get. I think, it's certainly really lucky. Great. Yeah. Good timing, good product, good leadership team. And it sounds like real alignment in the team as well. I think that's the other thing. If the leadership team aren't aligned, that becomes quite obvious to people joining a business quickly. I'm conscious, before we wrapped up, a couple of things that I wanted to talk about, because I know that when we were talking the other day, we talked about the process that you've gone through joining and how you've got this real, fundamentally, you like being on the phone. you like talking to people, and you believe that. I've spoken to loads of people who've said this, who are experienced SDRs, SDR leaders, who've said, if you're getting into a new business and you're looking to really understand the customers, you understand the personas, and to start getting answers to questions, you've got to get on the phone. And I know you believe the same, don't you?
100%, yeah.
What is it about that you think, like, why is that so important to you?
Because I think that when you have a conversation with someone, oh, this is going to sound silly, but then you're having a conversation, right? Yeah. Whereas if you're just emailing back and front, your tone of voice can be misinterpreted. You can misinterpret theirs. You might not be able to ask the same questions in a way that you would via the phone. And I think it's just a great opening to getting also a solid meeting, because you have your chance then to ask questions and to establish trust with them. Yeah. And yes, of course, you can ask questions via the email, but establishing trust in the initial phases, I think that increases your chances of that converting to revenue massively. And I think that can't be underestimated. And then also for an SDR, when someone picks up, you can also hear their tone of voice. You can hear if they're having a good day, if they're having a bad day. And then that's such a great way to be able to, well, not necessarily mimic, but reflect their mood. Yeah. And then again, in that way, you can establish trust. And you can also then realize, oh, I've caught you at a really bad time. Can I call you back another time? And then just call them back. Don't be sending any calendar invites, because that's not a meeting, but just genuinely call them back at that time. And then just establish this relationship. And then you set them up for a meeting, which is worth their while, and also for your account executives.
Yeah. I think I completely agree, by the way, completely agree. And I think even in our business, when we've done sales training and hired new people who've got on the phone, if you've not done it before, you can. I've hired people in the past who've wanted to go and build a really smart kind of email sequence out with no real experience, but they've seen lots about doing that, and they've read about it and said, I want to trial it. And I'm like, by all means, trial it. Like, I don't. There's no harm in doing it. If it works for you, then it works for you. But if you have no prior experience of talking to, for us, it would be speaking to either founders or senior sales leadership, senior marketing leadership. The only way you're really going to find out more about those people is to pick up the phone and talk to them. And as you say, sometimes they answer the phone and you can just tell straight away, this conversation is not going to go far today, because for whatever reason, the list could be endless. But I completely agree. I wanted to ask just quickly, we didn't say we were going to cover this point off, by the way, but you referenced it, and I just think it's really interesting. So I'm going to hit you on the bounce before we wrap up. I know you mentioned having ADHD, and I've interviewed and worked with actually quite a few people who've had ADHD in sales, and almost without exception, they're some of the best and highest performing salespeople that I've met. Almost without exception. It's almost, I don't want to say it, but to them, it almost feels like a bit of a superpower that other people don't have. Is that something that you feel? I mean, obviously it's early on in your career, but even comparing yourself to other people at the same stage, do you feel like this sets me apart because I know that there are certain things that I just can do better than others? Does that make sense?
Well, I wouldn't want to say better than others. What I would say is in a different way.
I said better. You didn't say better. I said better.
I approach things in a very different way. And I think that ADHD is 100% my superpower. What I would say is that it only becomes your superpower when you understand it and you understand how your brain works. So for example, on some days, then I find it really hard to get my focus. Yeah. And then I consistently feel like, I should be doing so much more. And I said, well, I'm doing as best as I can today. And then tomorrow I will be in hyper focus, and then I'll do 3 times the amount. So it's also allowing yourself that space to breathe, because if I were the whole time to think, I haven't done this because of it, then it will start to hinder. But I think really embracing it, being able to get into hyperpower, and I can think of different situations from different angles, and then yes, that's 100% a superpower.
Do you know what? I think that point around allowing yourself to breathe and not, accepting the fact that not every single day is going to be your best day is something that I would say almost every SDR or everybody early on in their sales career could take on board, I think. And again, I think good sales leaders will create an environment where you're allowed to be like that. Very, very few people can consistently, day after day after day, just repeat and repeat and repeat and repeat without a blip. And actually, yeah, it's that point of reflection, isn't it? And being able to sit back and reflect on how things have gone. Fantastic. Lauren, that's us half an hour sailed through. More that we can talk about for sure, but we'll keep to the half an hour today, and maybe you'll come back and do another session with us next year when we can hear more about what's going on at Abacum and how their career is progressing. But thank you so much. Like, we've covered loads there. That's been really, really interesting. Apologies, my phone went off. I didn't put my phone on silent. I don't know if you heard that, but it just what an absolute, you'd think I've not done this before, but yeah, thank you. Really, really enjoyed it. Hopefully you've enjoyed it too.
I have. Thank you so much for having me. It's been great.
No problems. Thank you. Cheers all. Bye-bye.